Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Have you ever wondered why ancient people believed so strongly in curses, those mysterious warnings said to guard sacred places and powerful objects? Tonight, let us take a quiet step back in time and explore where these legends truly began. Welcome. Friends, settle in, get comfortable, and let your curiosity wander as we open the first door into a world where history blends with the unexplained. Long before written records became common, many civilizations felt that unseen forces shaped the world around them. Nature was unpredictable, life was fragile, and the line between daily reality and the spiritual realm felt thin. To them, a curse was not just a threat, it was a form of protection, a way to guard something valuable when physical defenses were not enough. Sacred tombs, royal treasures, family heirlooms, all could be shielded by warnings meant to discourage intruders. These early beliefs grew from a deep respect for ancestors and the unknown. People feared disrupting what belonged to the past, not because of superstition alone, but because they believed every object carried a kind of memory, an imprint left by those who once touched it. If something was important enough to be preserved, then it was important enough to be protected, and the idea traveled far. From the river valleys of ancient Egypt to the early kingdoms of Mesopotamia, from temple grounds in Asia to the stone circles of early Europe, whispers of curses appeared again and again. They were not always frightening. Sometimes they were symbolic, poetic, or simply a cultural reminder to leave sacred things undisturbed. Tonight, we begin our journey with this question. Why did so many ancient cultures believe that unseen forces guarded their treasures? Let us follow that thread and see where it leads. When people today hear the word curse, the story that often rises to the surface is the legendary curse of the pharaohs. Ancient Egypt, with its towering pyramids and elaborate burial chambers, created one of the most enduring mysteries in human history. And at the center of it all stands the tale of Tutankhamun's tomb, discovered in 1922, a moment that sparked worldwide fascination and fear. For the ancient Egyptians, the afterlife was not simply a belief. It was a carefully structured journey. Pharaohs were buried with treasures, food, clothing, and objects meant to accompany them into eternity. Because these tombs held priceless items, they were often threatened by robbers. To protect them, inscriptions warning of spiritual consequences were carved into walls or written on funerary objects. These warnings were not meant to harm. They were reminders of the sacred boundary between the living world and the eternal one. But when Tutankhamun's tomb was opened, a wave of sensational stories swept the world. Several members of the excavation team passed away in the years that followed, and newspapers quickly wove these events into a single narrative. The young king's spirit was guarding his resting place. Headlines spread the idea that a powerful curse had been awakened. Of course, historians later explained that the events were likely coincidences, amplified by dramatic storytelling and the excitement of the discovery. Yet the legend remained, growing stronger with every retelling. It captured the imagination of millions because it blended archaeology, mystery, and the lingering echo of ancient beliefs. So as we move deeper into this story, one truth becomes clear. The allure of the pharaoh's curse is not just about fear. It is about the timeless human fascination with what lies beyond the visible world. As stories about Tutankhamun's tomb spread across the world, people became increasingly convinced that anyone who stepped into an ancient burial chamber might be stepping into danger. Newspapers at the time loved dramatic headlines, and soon every unexpected event surrounding the excavation team was woven into a single grand narrative. Those who disturbed the past were facing consequences. One of the most talked about figures was Lord Carnarvon, the financial backer of the excavation. When he passed away months after the tomb's discovery, reporters immediately pointed to the so-called curse. They connected unrelated incidents, illnesses, accidents, even natural causes, and presented them as evidence of something supernatural. In truth, the team worked in difficult conditions, dealt with unfamiliar environments, and faced health risks common in early 20th century expeditions. But once a chilling story takes root, every small detail seems to confirm it. Other archaeologists throughout the 19th and 20th centuries found themselves at the center of similar rumors. If a researcher fell ill, if equipment malfunctioned, or even if a shipment of artifacts was delayed, whispers would begin. Had they angered ancient spirits? Most experts dismissed the claims, but the public remained captivated. The idea that the past could reach forward into the present added a layer of mystery to archaeological work. Over time, these stories became part of the mythos surrounding Egyptology. They painted explorers as people who walked a thin line between science and the unknown. Even though historians have repeatedly explained that no documented curse caused these events, the belief persisted simply because it made the discoveries feel larger than life. And so, the legend grew, not only from what happened, but from how people interpreted it. In the end, the power of these tales reminds us that human imagination is sometimes stronger than any written record. In many ancient cultures, a curse was not imagined as a frightening force. It was more like a spiritual lock, a boundary meant to keep the living from disturbing what was meant to rest undisturbed. Nowhere is this clearer than in how early civilizations protected their tombs, temples, and sacred possessions. For the Egyptians, the afterlife was a deeply personal journey. Tombs were not simply burial places. They were carefully prepared homes for eternity. Every object inside served a purpose: food for nourishment, statues for companionship, amulets for safety. Because these spaces held both emotional and cultural value, protecting them became essential. Physical traps were rare and expensive, but a written warning that was powerful, memorable, and effective. These protective inscriptions often carried poetic language. May those who disturb this place be far from peace, or let the guardian watch over these chambers. They were less about harm and more about respect, a reminder that crossing into a sacred world without permission carried consequences not from anger, but from disrupting the natural order. Other cultures shared similar beliefs. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets included warnings to protect treasured artifacts. In ancient China, guardians were carved on tomb walls, representing spiritual forces tasked with watching over the deceased. In Europe, early burial mounds were often surrounded by folklore, warning people not to disturb ancestral ground. To the people of those eras, a curse was not superstition. It was a way of expressing reverence. It established a boundary between the living and the sacred, a boundary meant to be honored. So, when we hear stories about ancient curses today, it helps to remember this. They were not born from fear, but from the desire to protect memory, tradition, and the deep connection between generations. Although Egypt is the most famous when it comes to ancient curses, it was far from the only civilization that believed in spiritual warnings. Across the world, many cultures developed their own versions of protective messages, each shaped by unique traditions, landscapes, and beliefs about the unseen world. In Mesopotamia, one of the earliest centers of human civilization, rulers often placed clay tablets inside temples and royal tombs. These tablets carried inscriptions asking the gods to guard the resting place. Some warned that anyone who removed a sacred item would lose favor from the divine. These messages were not meant to frighten. They were meant to reinforce the idea that every object inside held spiritual value. Far to the east, ancient China blended symbolism with spiritual guardianship. Tombs were decorated with carved figures representing protective forces, tigers, dragons, and mythical beings. Instead of writing warnings, many Chinese tombs used imagery to communicate the same message. Respect this place. Do not disturb the journey of the one who rests here. Even in early Europe, long before written languages spread across the continent, burial mounds carried their own aura of caution. Villagers believed that certain places were watched over by ancestral spirits. Disturbing these mounds was considered disrespectful not only to the dead, but to the community's history. Stories of misfortune served as reminders to leave sacred ground untouched. In the ancient Americas, the Maya and other cultures also used spiritual protection. Elaborate tombs and ceremonial objects were believed to hold energy from the past. Disturbing them without proper rituals was thought to disrupt the balance between the physical world and the spiritual one. Across continents and centuries, the message echoed the same truth. Sacred spaces belong to both memory and eternity crossing. That boundary required reverence. Why do stories about curses feel so believable, even to people living in the modern world? The answer lies not in ancient tombs or haunted artifacts, but in something much closer: human psychology. Throughout history, people have tried to make sense of events that felt unexpected or unexplained, and curses offered a simple, powerful explanation. At the heart of it is fear of the unknown. When something unusual happens, an illness, an accident, a streak of bad luck, the mind naturally wants a cause. In ancient times, science was limited, so people filled the gaps with beliefs that felt logical to them. If someone disturbed a sacred place and later faced misfortune, it was easy to connect the two. Another factor is coincidence. Life is full of random events, but when a dramatic story is already in place, our minds start linking unrelated things together. This is how many tales of curse victims grew. Once newspapers began reporting on the pharaoh's curse, every unrelated misfortune around the excavation seemed to fit into the narrative, even when the events had ordinary explanations. Then there is superstition, something found in every culture. Humans naturally look for patterns, even where none exist. A warning carved on a tomb wall, a strange symbol, or an unsettling story can plant a seed of belief that grows over time. When a narrative is repeated often enough, it becomes part of cultural memory. Ultimately, belief in curses reveals more about us than about the ancient world. It shows how deeply we value meaning, stories, and the idea that actions carry consequences. Even today, in an age of technology and science, the mind still responds to mystery in the same fundamental way, with curiosity, caution, and imagination. Even though we live in an age of technology, the idea of haunted objects has not faded, it has simply changed shape. Today, instead of ancient tombs and forgotten temples, the stories often center on everyday items. A doll passed through generations, an old mirror found in an attic, or a painting that seems to watch from the wall. These objects capture attention not because of dramatic legends carved in stone, but because they feel so close, so ordinary, and yet somehow unsettling. Modern tales usually begin with something small, a strange noise in the night, a sense of discomfort around a certain object, or a series of events that feel too coincidental to ignore. Over time, these small moments build a narrative. People begin to wonder whether an object carries emotional energy from the past, an imprint of moments or memories that remain even after their owners are gone. It is not about fear. It is about the possibility that life leaves traces behind. Museums, collectors, and researchers have recorded countless stories of items that visitors describe as heavy, cold, or full of emotion. Whether these feelings come from the object itself or from the story attached to it, the impact is real. Objects with dramatic histories, items connected to difficult events, old estates, or abandoned places seem to gather myths more easily than others. In many cases, the mystery is amplified by the simple fact that the object is old. Age carries its own weight. A scratched music box or a weathered photograph invites the mind to fill in the blanks. Who held it? What moments did it witness? What emotions might still cling to it? Modern haunted object tales remind us that mystery does not only belong to the distant past. Sometimes it can sit quietly on a shelf, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to notice. Among all the modern haunted object stories, paintings hold a very special place. There is something uniquely powerful about an image, colors, faces, and emotions captured on a flat surface, yet capable of stirring the imagination in ways few other objects can. Around the world, certain paintings have earned reputations not only for their beauty, but for the uneasy feelings they inspire in those who encounter them. Stories usually begin the same way. Someone brings home an old painting from an antique shop, an estate sale, or an attic discovery. At first, it seems like a beautiful piece of art. But soon, the new owner notices strange details, shadows that seem to shift, a figure whose expression looks different at night, or a room that suddenly feels colder when the painting is present. Even though these experiences may be subtle, they spark curiosity. And once curiosity awakens, every small detail begins to appear meaningful. Many haunted paintings gain their reputation from the emotional intensity captured in them. A portrait with deep, sorrowful eyes may feel as though it carries the lingering echo of the person it represents. A landscape painted during a difficult moment in the artist's life may hold an energy that viewers interpret as heavy or unsettling. Sometimes, people describe feeling watched. Other times, they simply say the artwork has an atmosphere that is hard to ignore. Museums and galleries occasionally receive reports from visitors who feel uneasy around certain pieces. Whether those reactions come from lighting, composition, or the power of suggestion, they add to the painting's growing legend. And as stories spread through whispers, articles, or online discussions, the mystery deepens. These tales show us that art is more than pigment on canvas. It is emotion, memory, and history woven together. And sometimes, when the right painting meets the right viewer, that connection can feel almost alive. There is something almost magical about artwork. Even though a painting is made from simple materials, canvas, pigment, brushstrokes, it often feels like it carries far more than just its physical form. Many people believe that art can hold emotional energy, and this idea has shaped countless stories about mysterious or haunted pieces. But why does a simple image create such a strong impression? Part of the answer lies in the connection between artist and artwork. Every painting is the result of hours, sometimes months of focus, emotion, and intention. When an artist pours their feelings into a piece, viewers can sense it, even centuries later. A joyful painting radiates warmth. A sorrowful portrait can make the room feel heavier. This emotional resonance can be so strong that some people interpret it as something beyond the ordinary. Another reason is the power of human perception. Our minds are naturally wired to read faces, notice patterns, and search for meaning. When we look into painted eyes, we instinctively imagine the person behind them, who they were, what they felt, and what stories they carried. That emotional projection can make a painting feel almost alive. There is also the mystery of unknown history. Many old artworks come with little to no information about their past owners, the places they traveled, or the events they witnessed. That sense of missing context creates space for imagination to grow. If a painting survived a difficult period in history, or was found in an unusual place, it becomes even easier to believe it absorbed some lingering energy. In truth, what people describe as supernatural is often a combination of emotion, memory, atmosphere, and interpretation. Art holds meaning because we give it meaning. And when a painting triggers a feeling we can't easily explain, the experience becomes unforgettable. As captivating as these stories are, there is always a balance between wonder and explanation. For every tale about a cursed artifact, there is also a scientific perspective that tries to understand what is really happening. And interestingly, both sides help us appreciate why these legends endure. From a scientific point of view, many unusual experiences can be traced back to natural causes. Old objects, especially those stored for decades, can carry mold, bacteria, or chemical residues that affect the senses. A person who enters a dusty attic or handles an aged item might feel lightheaded, uneasy, or short of breath sensations that easily feed into a haunting narrative. Environmental factors also play a role. Changes in lighting, temperature, or airflow can make shadows move or create sounds that feel mysterious. A painting hung near a draft might sway slightly, or its colors may look different depending on the time of day. These small details feel uncanny when we already suspect the object has a story behind it. On the other hand, folklore thrives because it reflects the emotional world. When an artifact has a dramatic or tragic history, people naturally interpret ordinary events through a more symbolic lens. It is not that the object is chosen randomly, its background gives it weight. A sculpture from an ancient temple, or a painting tied to a stretch personal story often inspires deeper reactions, simply because the mind fills in the blanks. In reality, both science and folklore shape how we understand mysterious artifacts. Science offers explanations, while folklore offers meaning. And somewhere between the two, the human imagination builds stories that feel timeless. These dual perspectives remind us that mystery is not something to solve, it is something to explore. Even in modern times, when museums rely on research, preservation science, and careful documentation, there are still objects that staff quietly choose not to display. These decisions rarely appear in official statements, but stories often circulate behind the scenes, whispers from curators, security guards, or archivists who have spent long hours alone with the collections. Some museums receive donations of items with unsettling reputations: a portrait whose previous owners reported strange experiences, a mirror said to cause discomfort, or a relic connected to a dramatic moment in history. Even when the museum does not believe in curses, the visitor experience matters. If guests repeatedly report that an exhibit feels heavy, or staff mention unusual sensations during setup, administrators may choose to keep the item in storage rather than on public display. One well-known example involves old Victorian-era paintings acquired by several European museums. Some pieces were said to evoke intense emotional reactions, visitors feeling sadness, unease, or an unexplained urge to step away. While these responses may come from lighting, composition, or the subject's expression, the impressions were strong enough that curators chose to store certain works instead of showcasing them. Another story involves a wooden artifact from an abandoned estate, donated along with notes about its unusual history. The object was never displayed, not because anyone believed it held supernatural power, but because its past was complicated, and the museum felt the item carried an atmosphere that might unsettle viewers. These cases highlight an interesting truth. Even institutions built on science and history respect the emotional impact of objects. Whether or not an item is truly haunted, the feelings it evokes are real. And museums quietly acknowledge that by choosing carefully what they share with the world. Even with all our technology, research, and modern understanding, stories about ancient curses still hold a remarkable grip on our imagination. They show up in books, movies, documentaries, and late-night conversations. But what makes these legends so enduring? Why do they continue to fascinate people across generations? Part of the answer lies in our love for mystery. In a world where so much can be explained, stories that remain just out of reach feel refreshing. A curse suggests that there is still something hidden, something untouched by science, an echo from the past that challenges our sense of certainty. It invites us to wonder, to step briefly into a world where the boundaries between history and the unknown seem thinner. Another reason is the emotional power of the narrative. Curses speak to deep human themes: respect for ancestors, fear of disturbing sacred places, curiosity about the unseen. These themes appear in nearly every culture, which is why stories of ancient warnings resonate so widely. They combine morality, mystery, and memory into a single tale that feels larger than life. Curses also survive because they are shared stories. Each time someone retells a legend, whether in a museum, an article, or an online discussion, the story grows a little more vivid. The details shift slightly, the atmosphere deepens, and new listeners add their own interpretations. Over time, the curse becomes less about specific events and more about the feeling it creates. Most importantly, these legends remind us that history is not just dates and artifacts. It is filled with emotions, fears, hopes, and unanswered questions. And that is why the idea of a curse remains powerful. It lets us feel connected to the ancient world, not just as observers, but as participants in an ongoing mystery. As we come to the end of tonight's journey, one thing becomes beautifully clear. Curses, whether ancient or modern, are not just tales about danger or misfortune. They are reflections of something much deeper: our desire to understand the world, to connect with the past, and to make sense of the mysteries that surround us. From the grand tombs of Egyptian pharaohs to quiet paintings hanging in forgotten halls, these stories remind us that every object carries a history, and every history leaves a trace. Whether the legends grew from coincidence, emotion, or imagination, they all point to the same human truth: we are storytellers. We give meaning to the unknown, shape memories into myths, and pass these tales from one generation to the next. And sometimes the power of a story becomes just as real as the artifact that inspired it. So tonight, as you settle into rest or drift into thought, let the mysteries linger gently, not as something to fear, but as a quiet reminder that the world is filled with wonders, some explained, some still waiting to be understood. The past is never as distant as it seems. Its whispers travel through time, carried in objects, legends, and the stories we continue to tell. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope the calm of this journey stays with you. Wishing you a peaceful night, and I will see you in the next story. Verse 17. Enter verse 17.